Good afternoon and welcome. My name is Brad Trammell, and for the next 15 to 20 minutes, I will be your guide as I take a look at MFA programs in a two-part series that asks the questions, what is an MFA program? Should I apply to an MFA program? How do I apply to an MFA program? And what the fuck do I do now that I'm in an MFA program? In my hundreds of studio visits with Patreon contributors, this is the number one thing people want to talk about. So I figured I'd put all my thoughts out there so we can start those conversations a little further ahead. Unlike some of my art world reports that have forced me to read a book, for today's report I'll be basing it on 10 years of my own learning experiences and failures as a grad student and as a teacher of grad students. My hope is that by showing you some of the ways that I've fucked up, I can help you fuck up slightly less. Let the MFA report commence. Part 1. First, let's talk about what MFA programs are. 4-year BFA programs are about getting you to understand your own art. 2-year MFA programs are about getting you in a position where you can confidently project that work into the world. When you boil it down, MFA programs are designed to do two things: professionalize and radicalize. Part of professionalizing means that you learn how to interact with people in the art world, but it's not like an etiquette class or something where that's formally taught. They just pre-arrange social encounters for you with other students and faculty and visiting artists where you're kind of in a trial by fire where you learn how to interact with those people as you're doing it. A big part of the professionalizing process for MFA programs is to establish real-world habits that if you don't have before you enter the MFA program, you are meant to keep doing after you leave the MFA program. In other words, the school provides you with training wheels for your professional life, and you are supposed to keep riding the bike on your own afterwards. So, what are these training wheels? This means the school providing you with a studio where you're expected to make new work on a regular basis. Providing you with seminar classes where you learn about your own research interests and develop research habits. Providing you with a built-in group of student peers and paid guests to do studio visits with, just as you're expected to continue doing studio visits after you leave the incubated bubble of your MFA program. And finally, it means the MFA program providing you with an exhibition space to stage your own solo thesis show, which is meant to get you used to the budgeting and scheduling and production process of putting on a solo show at a gallery. Professionalization is meant to ready you for a smooth transition into life as a working artist by identifying the current terms and conditions of being a working artist and replicating them in-house. Second thing grad school is meant to do is radicalize you, both in the sense of being exposed to lots of art theory, but also in the sense of becoming an evangelist for your own work. This means reading copious art theory for class and then figuring out how to use that theory in the way that you either describe or make your work, and then figuring out how your work relates to the world at large. It means group critiques where you are meant to check your privilege and examine your own work's shortcomings. It means soul-searching conversations with underpaid faculty who teach you about the corrosive effect of capitalism on the art world. Smart texts read by smart people, taught by smart people to get smarter. The blob of interests you develop in your BFA is meant to be refined into a sharp point by the end of your MFA, and all within just 2 years. The purpose of radicalizing students is to get them to differentiate from one another and follow their artistic interests to the furthest logical point. Theory is meant to be a kind of scaffolding that allows you to build up your own practice and justify taking further risks. Part 2, should I go to grad school? And the answer to this is no. Well, maybe. But first, it's worth asking yourself another question, which is, why do I want to go to grad school? I know that I failed to ask myself this question because of how natural the progression seemed of being in school your entire fucking life. Whether I consciously realized it or not, I kind of just thought you go to elementary school and then go to middle school and then you go to high school and then you go to college, but if you get a BFA, then you probably should just get an MFA too. Seems natural. What I didn't realize is that grad school is not an inevitability. It's an option you can choose to do to further your own goals. But maybe your goals don't require it. Either way, the question, why do I want to go to grad school, is important because it forces you to examine your goals for after grad school so that going to a very expensive grad school doesn't become the goal unto itself. I say this because I know that I was attracted to the perceived prestige of going to one of the more famous grad programs, when in reality, that prestige is pretty much non-existent. When you get to the art world job market, No one is checking your CV for educational experience. Aside from the ability to teach, the value of your MFA degree means nothing outside of the connections you make and the knowledge you gain while you're in that program. There's no gallery who bases their programming on educational experience. And while it's true that some MFA programs have historically churned out more art market darlings than others, I can assure you it is the egg and not the chicken in this case. What I mean by that is that young, ambitious people who are sociopathically dedicated to the furtherance of their art practice are more likely to want to be in grad programs that have competitive admission standards. And these are the types of personalities that just so happen to excel in the art world. These schools are seen as the best because the students who wind up going there are ambitious social climbers whose will to succeed translates perfectly to the art market. Think of it like this. You either have to be insanely rich or you have to be insanely confident to think that going to Columbia for $70,000 a year is a good investment. But either way, those two attributes are looked at favorably in the art world: insane richness and insane confidence. Yale or Columbia are really not that different from a program like UIC or MassArts grad program in terms of the quality of education you're going to receive and in terms of the pedigree of the people on faculty. The difference is the ambition of the students who go to those programs to wind up being in the art market as soon as humanly possible. What we perceive as the best grad programs has less to do with the education they provide and everything to do with the type of student they attract. On the other end of the spectrum, in the studio visits that I do, I find that a lot of people are considering getting a grad degree because they previously got their BFA degree and they still make art occasionally, but they feel kind of adrift. They're not as engaged with art as they want to be, and they're looking for a shot in the arm to get them making art again, or maybe to get them back on the path to gallery representation. These potential grad applicants often miss the structure their BFA experience provided them, the assigned readings, the access to facilities to make work, even the group critiques and the kind of instilled community that provides. If you are considering going to grad school for these reasons, I strongly encourage you to think again, and here's why. Grad programs only offer you those things that you're looking for 2 years, but the cost of grad school can last a lifetime. Before immediately resorting to grad school, you owe it to yourself to independently create the artistic environment you want grad school to provide you. If you want a studio, then pay the extra few $100 to get one on your own and go work in it. If you want a community of peers, then reach out directly and indirectly. This means sending emails to go grab a beer or a cup of coffee from someone whose art you like or whose essays you enjoy reading. Because the odds are, in the art world, they'll take you up on it. And maybe they're so stupid they'll only do it for $5. It means putting your work in the world, whether that's on social media or a freaking apartment gallery that your friend runs. The quickest way to create a community of like-minded peers around you is for them to be able to see what it is that you're working on. If you want structure for your research, then send a text to 3 of your friends, grab 3 bottles of wine, and meet up on Friday nights for a reading group. Grad programs do not hold a copyright on working in your studio or researching stuff with your friends or meeting new people. These are all things that you can do on your own for significantly less money. Giving yourself a chance to develop before you pay to give grad school a chance to develop you is smart for 2 reasons. First off, you might find that it works. You might find that when you finally stop procrastinating and get that studio, you feel compelled to work in there more often. You might find that you didn't need grad school to set up those studio visits on your behalf, and that you are perfectly capable of reaching out and creating those new connections organically. You might find that you have more fun reading Baudrillard with your 3 best friends than you do with 15 strangers in a grad class. What I'm saying is that you might find that you didn't even need grad school. All you needed to do was start trying again and to reach out to an art world that exists outside of your idea notebook. And sure, you might do all those things I mentioned and still feel like you could benefit from grad school. Totally understandable. But by spending a year or 2 or 5 working on your own art, building your own community, researching on your own terms, you will be in that much better of a position to apply to grad school if you decide you still want. I've been part of MFA application acceptance committees, and I can tell you from behind the scenes, They are not looking for people who are using grad school as an excuse to start making art again. $60,000 to $100,000 is a lot of money to spend to try figuring out if you want to make art the rest of your life. And guess what? It's okay if you don't want to do that. Just because you got a BFA does not mean you have to be an artist the rest of your life. Grad schools that aren't just looking for a check to cash from their students, the ones that are worth going to, are looking for applicants that are already majority formed as an artist. As someone who applied to grad school straight out of undergrad, I can tell you, I was not fully formed as an artist. If you ask yourself this question, how fully formed am I as an artist? And you come back with an answer like 30%, you should know that grad school is not going to provide you that other 70% of development. What grad school is going to get you is confused. You go to grad school to figure out what you're doing, those professionalizing studio visits with famous artists and curators will be nowhere near as useful to you as they will be to somebody who has a pretty good idea of what they're doing. Most of these visiting artists, curators, and writers are not educators. They are not in your studio to teach you how to make art. They're in your studio because the school paid them, and maybe, just maybe, they're trying to figure out a way to fit you in their world. Whether that means telling their dealer about you, or getting you a show, or maybe writing about you. If you're at 30%, you're probably not in a position to reap the benefits of those studio visits because those people can't help you professionally. I know this from my own experience being in grad school and not knowing what the fuck I was doing with my art. When I was in grad school, I was managing jogging posts of laptops on fire and getting into Bitcoin and the Silk Road while simultaneously trying to start my own version of Tumblr or something. I was a damn mess. Yeah, I was doing a bunch of stuff, but I had no idea how any of those things were related, nor do I understand how they're related today. And a lot of them were oddly tonally inconsistent. I also wasn't making any physical art objects at the time. So when people came into my studio, the only objects I had available were the packages I ordered from the Silk Road. It looked like a fucking DEA bust publicity photo. And I'm sure all of this was entertaining to the Liam Gillicks and Trisha Donnellys of the world, but what were they going to do with that? They were probably more likely to tell the police about me than they were to tell their dealer about me. I was paying $35,000 a semester to show people raw materials I bought from the internet. What the fuck? If you're at 30% like I was, and you enter a competitive grad program's critiques, you're going to get confused. This is an environment where a lot of very confident people are speaking completely subjectively. So you can walk away from an experience like that with 4 completely different paths to take your art in next. And finally, it might seem counterintuitive, but the more formed you are, the more likely you are to be able to take risks in your art practice. When I was working with grad students as a teacher, it was always easier to get people who were more fully formed to take risks because they had a base of interest to fall back on. As for the people who are 30%, as I was when I entered grad school, they often resort to making the work they felt most comfortable with in undergrad, just like I did when I went to grad school. If you're reading 300 pages a week of Deleuze and Foucault and Butler, yes, technically that information is entering your skull, but you don't have an effective filtration process to know what is valuable and what isn't. It's difficult to apply theory when you don't know what you're applying it to. And look, there's nothing wrong with being at 30%. People are always changing as artists. Sometimes 90% doesn't feel so 90% 2 years later when, I don't know, all of your galleries get rid of you and you stop selling art and you're deeply in debt and completely broke. Trust me, I know. This is just to say you should be reasonably developed before you think about applying to grad school. Invest in yourself before you invest in a grad program. It's a lot cheaper, it's more rewarding, and it will definitely improve your experience in grad school if you should decide to go. And that decision, whether or not you decide to go to grad school, should be a goal-oriented decision. The goal should not be to go to grad school itself. Not everything in life should be goal-oriented. I don't go to the bar to get shit-faced with my friends with a goal in mind, per se. But if you're going to spend $70,000 on something or $100,000, you should know what you want out of it, whether that's to become a teacher or a curator or an artist or whatever. You should let that goal inform your application process.